The 13th Candle by Tuesday Love Sang Rampa. Read for you by BlueFriend in beautiful BC. Chapter 9. Beneath the shadowed rocks the old woman sat and sobbed her misery. Ceaselessly she rocked herself and flung herself to the unyielding ground. Her eyes were red and swollen, and her furrowed cheeks were streaked with dirt, which the tears had water-marked. The sunlight, as from another world, threw down strong black shadows across the entrance to her cave, shadowed bars that seemed to imprison her soul. Beyond the mouth of the cave, the Yalu River streamed endlessly on its way down from the highlands of Tibet, through India to form the sacred Ganges, and then on to the mighty seas, each drop of water like a soul going on to eternity. The waters roared and surged through close rock walls and tumbled over gorges into deep, deep pools before spilling over and rushing tumultuously on. The path between the mountain wall and the turbulent stream was smooth, beaten hard, and level by the passage of many feet over hundreds of years. The red-brown soil would, to a Western observer, have reminded him of a chocolate bar, so brown and smooth was it. The great rocks strewn carelessly at the sides of the trail were red-brown too, with the color which comes to rocks richly laden with ores. In a tranquil pool, fed by a feeble trickle from the mountainside, there came the glitters of specks of gold. Gold from the heart of the mountains. The tall man and the small boy rode sedately along the winding path, the path which wound so constantly close to the rock wall. The small ponies were weary, for this long day they had plodded from the small lamasery from which the sun's rays even now were glinting in the far distance towards the west. The man, in the saffron robe of a lama, looked about him, searching for a suitable spot at which to camp. The mouth of a cave loomed indistinctly through the screening blooms of rhododendron trees. The lama gestured and slid off the pony. The following pony stopped behind his fellow, and the young acolyte, unprepared, slid over the animal's head. Unhooking his pack, the lama strode to the mouth of the cave. The old woman was moaning in an ecstasy of misery, rocking backwards and forwards. "What ails you, old mother?" asked the lama gently. With a screech of terror, the old woman jumped to her feet, then fell on her face at the sight of the lama. Carefully he stooped and helped her to her feet. "Old mother," he said, "sit beside me and tell me what afflicts you so. Perhaps I may be able to help you." The young acolyte came blundering in, carrying his pack before him. Not seeing a rock ridge, he tripped over it and fell flat on his face. The old woman looked up and cackled with sudden laughter. The lama motioned the boy away, saying, "We will camp elsewhere. You look after the ponies." Turning again to the old woman, he said, "Now tell me, what is it that afflicts you so?" The old woman clasped her hands together and said, "O holy lama, hear my tale and help me. Only you can tell me what to do." The lama sat down beside her and nodded encouragingly, saying, "Yes, old mother, perhaps I can help, but you will have to tell me of your difficulties first. But you're not of our country, are you? Did you not come from the tea country?" The old woman nodded and replied, "Yes, we crossed over into Tibet. We used to be on one of the tea plantations, but we did not like it there. Some of the Western people treated us so badly. We had to pick so much tea, and always they were saying it had too many stalks in it, so we came here and made a living by the roadside." The Lama looked thoughtfully and said, "But tell me, what ails you now?" The old woman clasped and unclasped her hands, and it appeared to be in an agony of indecision. And then she said, "My husband and my 2 sons were living here with me. We managed quite well in helping traders to ford the river a little farther down, because we know just where the crossing stones are, and we had arranged them so that we knew exactly how best the traders could cross without falling in and being swept over the gorge. But yesterday my 2 sons and my husband climbed up the side of the cliff. We wanted eggs, and the birds were laying well." She stopped and broke into a bout of weeping again. The Lama put his arm around her shoulder to calm her. He pressed a hand gently at the base of her neck. Immediately her sobbing ceased, and she sat up, resuming her tale. "They had a good number of eggs. They had them in a little leather bag, and then I don't know what happened exactly. My husband seemed to lose his footing. A rock rolled beneath him, and he fell over, and he toppled down the rock side." She stopped to sob again, and then, shaking her head as if to clear away bad memories, she resumed. "My husband turned over as he fell and struck his head on the rocks down here. Poor fellow," she said, "that was always his weakest point. There was a horrible crunching and a splat, just like that, splat, and then a sound as if an old bundle of sticks were being stepped on." The Lama nodded his head in sympathy, and with a gesture encouraged the woman to continue. "But up on the cliffside my sons were in great difficulty. One tried to snatch the bag of eggs from his father's hand, and as he did so he stumbled also. The second son tried to grab either the eggs or his brother, I don't know which, and he fell as well. And then there was a small rock slide, and both boys fell, and they hit the rocks down there. Splat, splat, just like that." She cackled with an almost hysterical laugh, and the Lama was some time before he could get her composed again. At last she was able to continue with her story. "The way they hit, I shall never get it out of my mind. First there was this soggy splat, and then there was a crunching, splintering sound. So I've lost my husband and my 2 sons, and even the eggs were all broken up. Now I do not know what to do. Things are so difficult here." She stopped and sniffed and did a hoot or two full of anguish. Then she said, "A passing trader helped me straighten them out a bit, although it was rather difficult. They were all pulpy masses. They could have been rolled up like an old garment. Probably there wasn't a bone left in their body unbroken. And then, as the trader and I stood there, a horde of vultures descended, and we were horrified at how they went to work. Soon, more quickly than seemed possible, there was nothing left but the bones of my husband and my 2 sons, and they were shattered beyond belief." The Lama gently stroked the back of her neck because she was giving way to hysteria again. He gently held the back of her neck and applied a slight pressure. The woman sat upright, and the color returned to her cheeks. "You have told me enough," said the Lama. "Do not distress yourself." "No, holy Lama, I'd rather get it all off my mind if you'll hear me out." "Very well, then. Tell me whatever you wish to tell me, and I will listen," responded the Lama. "The trader and I stood there, I do not know for how long we stood there, watching in horror and fright as the birds cleaned up the fragmented bones, and then, well, we couldn't leave the bones. They were strewn on the path, could we? We gathered up all those bones in a basket, and we tipped them all in the river. They all went tumbling down over the gorge, and now I have no husband. Now I have no sons. Now I have nothing. You Tibetans believe in the holy fields. We believe in nirvana, but I am sore distressed. I'm frightened. I too would like to leave this world. I'm so frightened." The Lama sighed, and then murmured half to himself, "Yes, everyone wants to get to the heavenly fields, but no one wants to die. If only people could remember that although they walk through the valley of the shadow of death, they will experience no evil if they fear no evil." Then he turned to the old woman and said, "But, old mother, you're not going to leave this earth yet. What is it that you fear so?" "Living," she answered abruptly. "Living. What have I to live for? No man to look after me. How am I going to live? How am I going to eat? What can a woman alone do in this country? An old woman at that, an old woman who's no longer desirable to men. What can I do? I hope for death, but I fear death. I have no one, I have nothing. And when I die, what then? My own religion, which is different from yours, teaches me that when I live in another life, if indeed there be another life, that I shall be reunited with my family. We shall all be together again. But how can that be? For if I live on several years, surely my family will have grown away from me. They will have grown older. I am sore distressed. I fear, and I know not what I fear. I fear to live, and I fear to die. I fear what will I meet on the other side of death. It is not knowing. That's what I fear." Impulsively, she put out a hand and clasped the hand of the tall Lama. "Can you tell me what I shall encounter beyond death?" she asked in a tremulous voice. "Can you tell me why I should not throw myself over this gorge and die as my husband died, or as my sons died? Can you tell me why I should not do this and be reunited with them? We were poor, we were humble people, but we were happy together in our own way. We never had enough to eat, but we managed. Now I'm an old woman alone with nothing. Why, O holy Lama, why should I not end my misery? Why should I not go to my family? Can you tell me that, holy Lama?" She turned a beseeching look upon the Lama. He looked at her full of compassion and said, "Yes, old mother, it is very possible that I can bring you help by way of information. But first, I doubt that you've had enough food or drink this day, have you?" She shook her head dumbly. Her eyes were brimming bloodshot tears, and her lips were trembling under the intensity of her suppressed emotion. "We will have some tea and sampa," said the Lama, "and then you'll feel rather stronger, so that we can talk together, and I can tell you of the things which I know to be true." He rose to his feet, and going to the mouth of the little cave, called the acolyte. "Pick up some wood and light a fire," he said. First, we will have tea in Sampa, and then you and I will have to talk to the old mother within. We will have to do our duty and try to bring her the solace of the true religion." The young boy wandered off among the great rocks. There was no shortage of wood here, and he wished that conditions were more like it up in the valley of Lhasa, thousands of feet above. He wandered around, picking the driest wood he could find and collecting the most satisfactory pile. Just a little way up, on the edge of a very sharp rock, he saw something which excited his avid interest. Carefully he climbed up perhaps 50 feet and reached out a hand for the strange object which was there, a shining thing with black strands attached to it. Grasping it, he recoiled in such horror that he slid down the rock face. In his hand he found he had grasped the top of the skull of one of the victims. He slid down the rock face, landing in a rhododendron tree, which broke his fall. It also broke off many branches, for which he was grateful. It saved him a lot of work. He turned over the object in his hand and to which he had clung despite the fall. Black hair, a bit of skin, and then the bony top of a skull. Dropping his wood, he really galloped off to the side of the river and flung the thing well out towards the lip of the gorge. Perfunctorily he dipped his hands in the water to rinse them, and then flicked them dry as he ran back to pick up his wood. With an ample load, he returned to a spot near the cave mouth, and there he arranged a neat pile of small sticks and a little heap of tinder. Striking sparks with flint and steel, he tried to ignite the tinder which had become damp from his still wet hands. At the cave mouth, the Lama and the old woman looked out. The Lama smiled at the performance of the small acolyte, but the old woman, her stomach rumbling with hunger, said, "Tisk, tisk, tisk," and rushed out to the little pile of wood, her sorrows forgotten. Now she was the complete housewife, about to show this young man how a fire should be lit. Quickly, from her own scant supply, she took dry tinder and struck a whole stream of bright sparks. Kneeling down, she blew hard and hard and hard, and the glowing tinder suddenly burst into flames, hungrily reaching out to ignite the small twigs grouped above. Beaming her satisfaction, she hurried back to the cave to get a can which was already filled with water. The young acolyte stared moodily after her, thinking, why was it that women always interfered when men were doing a first-class job? Why did women always meddle, and reaping the fruits of a man's hard work, collect all the credit and all the good karma? Irritably he kicked out at a stone and then trudged upwards between the rocks again to bring back a further load of sticks. No knowing how careless this old woman will be with the firewood, he thought to himself. I'd better really stock up this time. Up near the base of the great overhanging rock, he found a bowl and a small charm box. He found a tattered scrap of rag. Looking at it, he recognized it as one of the sacred devil traps. Thinking more carefully about it, he remembered that some had been stolen, and then the tale came to him. Oh, yes, he thought, one of the ways they've been making money is by stealing stuff and getting it smuggled into India to be sold as souvenirs to Westerners. He stuffed the bowl, the charm box and the tattered scrap of cloth into the front of his robe, and spreading his arms wide, he picked up the big bundle of wood and tottered precariously down the path, not being able to see where he was walking. The old woman was busy again with the fire, and as the poor boy had surmised, she was piling it on as if she had a whole regiment of monks to collect it for her, instead of just one small boy. He dumped the pile of wood beside her, rather hoping that she would trip over it and fall into the fire and he wouldn't have to work so hard. Then, turning aside, he moved towards the llama, producing the bowl, the charm box, and scrap of cloth. "It is mine! It is mine! It belonged to my husband!" shrieked the old woman, jumping to her feet as quickly as if she were levitating. Rushing forward, she grabbed them from the young man and stared at them greedily. "The only thing I have in the world now to remind me of him." So saying, she pushed the things into the bosom of her dress and turned back to the fire, tears streaming from her eyes. The young acolyte looked gloomily at the llama and muttered, "Hope she doesn't get all that mess into the sampa. I never did like messed up sampa." The llama turned away and re-entered the cave in order to conceal the laughter which was threatening to destroy his gravity. Soon the llama, the small acolyte, and the old woman were sitting in separate places, eating the sampa and drinking the tea, for those in holy orders in Tibet prefer as a rule to eat alone or only in the company of their close associates. The very sparse meal was soon finished, and the llama, the acolyte, and the old woman cleaned their bowls with fine sand, rinsed them in the river, and put them back inside their clothes. The llama then said, "Come, old mother, let us sit by the fire, and let us see what we can do to discuss and solve your problems." He led the way back in and threw a handful of sticks on the spluttering little blaze. The young acolyte looked gloomily on, appalled at how quickly the wood was being consumed. The llama looked up and smiled and said, "Yes, you'd better get another load or two. We shall need some fire here. Be off with you." The boy turned and wandered off in search of wood and whatever else should offer itself. The llama and the old woman started to talk. "Old mother," said the llama, "your religion and my religion take different forms, but all religions lead the same way home. It does not matter what we believe, nor how we believe, so long as we do believe. For a true religion, with the mental and spiritual discipline which it enjoys upon its adherents, is the only salvation for our people and for yours." He stopped and looked at her and then resumed. "So you had thought of killing yourself, Well, that's no answer, you know. If you kill yourself, if you commit suicide, you merely add to your problems, you do not end them." The old woman looked up at him, for he was a large, tall man, and she was very small. She looked up at him with her hands clasped. Wringing her hands, she said, "Oh, yes, do tell me. I am ignorant. I do not understand anything. I have no knowledge at all, but yes, I had thought of killing myself by throwing myself against the gorge and becoming dashed against the rocks below, even as my husband and my sons were dashed against the rocks." "Suicide is no answer," said the Lama. "We came to this earth for the purpose of learning, for the purpose of developing our immortal soul. We came to this earth to face certain conditions, perhaps the hardships of poverty, perhaps the great temptations which assail the rich, for let us not think that money and possessions give one ease from worries. The rich also die, the rich also become ill, the rich also suffer from worries and persecutions and from a multitude of afflictions and problems unknown to the poor. We come to this earth and we choose our station according to the task that we have to accomplish. And if we commit suicide, if we kill ourselves, we are like a shattered bowl. And if you shatter your bowl, old mother, how are you going to eat? If you break your flint and your steel, there's no spark left with which to ignite the tinder. Then how would you survive?" The old woman nodded dumbly, as if in complete agreement, and so the Lama continued. "We come to this earth knowing before we come what our problems will be, knowing what hardships we shall have to undergo, and if we commit suicide, then we're running out on arrangements which we ourselves made for our own advancement." "But, Lama," said the old woman in an agony of exasperation, "we may know on the other side what we arrange, but why is it we don't know while we're here on this earth? And if we do not know why we're here, how can we be blamed for not doing that which we say we should have to do?" The Lama smiled down at her and said, "Oh, what a common question that is! Everyone asks the same thing. We do not know usually what task we have to do upon this earth, because if we did know, we would devote our whole energy to accomplishing that task, no matter how much it inconvenienced others. We have to do our task and at the same time help others. We have at all times to live according to the rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And if, in a selfish hurry to complete a given task, we tread upon the rights of others, then we just make extra tasks which we have to accomplish. And so it is that it is better for the majority of people not to know the tasks which they have to accomplish, not to know so long as they are upon the earth. The discussion was interrupted by a shout from the young acolyte. "Look, look!" he shouted. "Look what I've found!" He hurried into sight, carrying in his hands a small golden image. The weight was considerable, and he held it carefully, afraid that it might drop and fall upon his feet. The Lama rose to his feet, and as he did so, he happened to glance towards the old woman. Her face was a pale greenish color, her mouth was open, and her eyes were staring wide. She looked the absolute picture of complete terror. The Lama took the figure from the boy. Turning over the image, he saw on the base a mark. "Ah," he said, "this is one of the figures which was taken from the small lamasery up there. Robbers broke in, and this is one of the things they took." He turned and looked at the old woman, who was gibbering with fright. "I see, old mother, that you know nothing about this. I see that you had suspicions that your husband and 2 sons were doing something which they should not have been doing. I see that in spite of your suspicions that you were not sure, and that you had no part in this. So fear not, you will not be punished in any way for what is the sin of another." He turned back to the small boy and said, "There should be more gold. There should be precious stones also. We will go back to where you found this, and we will cast around to see if we can find the remainder of the articles which are missing." The old woman stuttered and stammered, and at last got out some words. "Oh, great and holy Lama, I know that my husband and my 2 sons were doing something over at the foot of that rock." She pointed. "I did not know what they were doing. I did not inquire, but I saw them over there, and that is near where they fell." The Lama nodded, and he and the young boy walked over there together. The young acolyte said, "But this is where I discovered this thing. It was just sticking out of the sand, so I picked it up." Together, Lama and acolyte dropped to their knees, and with flat stones dug down into the sandy soil. Soon they struck something hard, and gently ruffling through the soil with their fingers, they dislodged a substantial leather bag, in which, to their delight, were precious stones and small nuggets of gold. They dug together and ran their hands through the soil to see if anything had been missed. At last the Lama was satisfied that they had completely recovered the stolen articles. They rose to their feet, went back to the fireside, where the old woman was still sitting. "Tomorrow," he said, "you shall take these articles back to the lamasery. I shall give you a written message to present to the abbot, and he will give you a sum of money as a reward for the return of these articles. I shall make it clear to him in my note that you are not the guilty one. So, with the sum of money, you should be able to travel the path to your former home in Assam, where possibly you have relatives or friends with whom you can live. But now, let us discuss your other problems, for the things of the spirit should take precedence over the things of the flesh." "Holy Lama," said the young acolyte, "could we not have more tea while you talk? I am very thirsty with all the hard work and all the excitement. I should like to have more tea." The old Lama laughed and bade the boy go to the river and get more water, and yes, they would have some fresh tea. "Old mother," inquired the Lama, "what is this other matter which troubles you so? You said something about being united with your family." The old woman sniffed a bit in her sorrow and fright, and then said, "Holy Lama, I've lost my husband and my sons, and even if they did steal from the temple, they are still my husband and my sons, and I'd like to know if I shall meet them again in another life." "But of course," said the Lama, "much misunderstanding is caused, however, by the manner in which people on this earth will think that things are always the same. People do not like change. They do not like anything to be different. It is different on the other side. Here on this earth, you had your husband, and then you had your son, a baby. Later, you had another baby, and the babies grew up. They became small boys. They grew older, and they became young men. They were not the same. They grew up. It is thus on the earth because you came to the earth and they came to the earth for you all to be together. But your son on this earth may not be your son in the next life. One comes to the earth to live apart, to carry out a certain role, to accomplish a certain task. Here you come as a woman, but on the other side of life you may be a man, and your husband may be the female one. The old woman looked dazedly at the Lama. Obviously she was not taking it in at all. Obviously it was a matter beyond her comprehension. The Lama saw that, and so he continued. In Assam, when you were a girl, you probably saw some of those plays about the fertility of the soil, about Mother Nature. The actors were people whom you knew, and yet, when they came out to play their parts, they resembled other people. They were made up, dressed up, to resemble other people, to resemble gods and goddesses, and you could not recognize them for who they really were. Upon the little stage they carried out their acting and their posturing and their miming, and then they disappeared from the stage, soon after to reappear among you as the people you well knew. They were no longer the gods and goddesses and demons of the play. They were, instead, men and women well known to you, your friends, your neighbors, and your relatives. And so it is down here upon this earth. You are living a part. You are an actress. The ones who came as your husband and son were actors. At the end of the play, at the end of your life, you will go back and be what you were before you came down to this stage, which is the earth. And the people you will meet on the other side are the people you love, for you can only meet those who you want to meet and who want to meet you. You can only meet those whom you love. You will not see your sons as small babies. You will see them as they really are. But yet you will be a family, for people come in groups. And what is a group but a family? End of chapter 9.